Good evening, everyone. It's great to be back here with you tonight on another segment of what's called Chainbreakers. The past month, unfortunately, I was not able to be here with you. Had some family issues going on, but things are getting better. And so, anyway, it's just great to be back here with you to share with you about some great news. So, to go over just a review of what we did the first 4 weeks here. The first week we were here, we kind of did an overview of who we are and what Chainbreakers is. And then the second week we did a segment on step one, being powerless over our problem and how our life is becoming unmanageable because of that problem. The third week we shared about step two, coming to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. And then the last time we were here, we talked about step three, about making a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. Well, naturally in Chainbreakers, we define God. Well, no one can define God, but we actually use the biblical perspective of God of the New Testament, and yes, it is Christ. Okay? So tonight, what we're going to do is probably going to be the most imperative segments we've done. We're going to talk about something that's some people don't want to talk about, and that's themselves. Because step 4 of our 12-step program of recovery says we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. I've been around and in and around 12-step programs now for many, many years. I've taken the message of the 12-step recovery programs to treatment centers, detoxes, prisons throughout the state of Oklahoma for many years. It hurts me to see sometimes the same people there over and over and over again. Because what they do is what I like to call the step 1, 2, 3 dance. They'll do step 1, 2, and 3 while they're institutionalized, but get out and not do the 4th step of recovery. Why is this so vital? Every person who I've encountered who has used the 12-step fellowships as a revolving door and are fortunate to come back in, I always ask them, what step were you on before you went back out and did your deal? Whether it be alcohol, drugs, gambling, food, sex, porn, whatever. I always ask them the same question. What step were you on before you went back out? I'm going to say 95 or more % will say I never did a 4th step. It's vital. It is absolutely vital that we do this process of recovery called step 4, where we make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So what is, and I said, in the Chainbreakers, we use the biblical perspective of all the steps. Step 4 says, I'm going to repeat it again, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. A verse in the Bible in Lamentations, the Old Testament says, Lamentations 3, 40 and 41, let us examine ourselves and repent and turn again to the Lord. Let us lift our hearts and our hands to Him in heaven. That's Lamentations 3, 40 and 41. Digging out a written inventory of our life sounds to be like a whole lot of hard work. We take an occasional peek into our past, and it usually just makes us feel guilty. So we may think any inventory we would have to do is to be fearful. This step talks about a moral inventory. When a store takes stock of its inventory, it counts every single item both good and bad. This means that besides all of the negatives, we need to consider our positives also. Careful not to use and not to miss anything. So this is, again, vital. You know, every person on the face of the earth, man, woman, and child, we live on three basic God-given instincts. We live on our social instinct, our security instinct, and our sex instinct. When I say the word sex, it does not mean the actual, only one of the meanings of sexual instinct means physical sex. We're talking about intimacy, okay? Let's take a toddler who's brand new, or a toddler who's maybe 3 or 4 years old, who gets a new baby brother or sister, and they bring the new infant home, and all of a sudden you see the toddler doing everything he can to get all the attention. Why? Because his social, his security, and sex instinct is interfered with. Unfortunately, though, there's some of us, and myself included, that we never grew out of that. That we're going to make sure those instincts those basic instincts of life are met. Unfortunately, people like myself, I blew those instincts totally out of proportion. I was going to make sure they were met. As a result, that produced nothing but self-will. How can you possibly live on God's will when you're living on nothing but self-will? In a book I read, is one of the most heartening things that in regards to this. It says that selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt me, seemingly without provocation. But I invariably find that at some point in the past, I have made the decision based on self, which later puts me in the position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and I am an extreme example of self-will run riot, though I usually don't think so. Above anything else, I must be rid of the selfishness. I must, or it kills me. God makes that possible. And there's often seems to be no way of entirely getting rid of self without His aid. Many of us have moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we cannot live up to them, even though we would like to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying without any power. We had to have God's help, period. That's why we have step 1, 2, and 3. At the same time, though, this is why we have this inventory. So, it says here that this is the how and why of it. Next, I was going to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, I was going to be decided that hereafter, in this drama of life, God was going to be my director. He's the principal. He's the agent. He's the father. I'm his child. Most good ideas are simple. They're the concept, the keystone of this new and triumphant arch, through which I pass to freedom. So this tells me that selfishness and self-centeredness, that is the root of my problem. Look up the word root in the dictionary. And you'll find the source of everything. As we know, in the ground, there's roots. That's where all the nourishment for all the plants come. Without those, you die. The plant will die. The same with us. The root of our problems. driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking. I step on the toes of my fellows and they retaliate. So as a result of that, when I produce all this self-will within myself, that produces wrongs I've done to others. That in turn turns into resentments, fears, and harms or hurts. So how do we get rid of this? We put them on paper. We actually we write down who do I resent. First of all, we're going to talk about that here in a second. But the fact is, though, that we're going to talk about right now more about this manifestation of self. So the point is, like I said, we already read one verse there in the Bible in Lamentations, about making an inventory of ourselves. But let's now look at what it says in Matthew 7, 1 through 5. I think we've all heard this verse before. If not, you're in for a treat. Matthew 7, 1 through 5. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now I love this. Why do you look at the speck of the sawdust in your brother's eye when you pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time you have this plank in your own eye? This is why it's so important to realize that this inventory is not about your mama, it's not about your daddy, it's not about your spouse, it's not about your teacher. Was I potty trained on the potty chair backwards? It doesn't matter. We do a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, where we have the opportunity to take the plank out of our own eye and look at it through God's lens. It says here in this literature that resentment is the number one offender. It will destroy more people than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we not have only been spiritually and mentally ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. And what we're going to do, there'll be a handout or on the screen, it's going to show you exactly how to do an inventory of the resentments, old hurts, old angers that you have going on within your head. The first column is we're going to list the people, we're going to list institutions, we're going to list principles with which we are angry, and we're going to do that in the first column. We're going to do that all not horizontally, but vertically, one column at a time. After we do that first column of listing the people that we hurt, the list of people that we have resentments against, then we're going to the second column, we're going to ask ourselves, why do we have them? The third column, it says we're going to look at what did they affect. The fourth column is we're going to look at what did I do. But most importantly is the fifth column is going to be where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate. Again, this inventory is not your mama's, it's not your spouse's, it's yours. The word resentment comes from the Latin word centre, S-E-N-T-R-E, which means to feel. You put the letters R-E on that means again. I know yesterday and this past weekend, some of us watched a lot of football. I know I did. And let's suppose that we saw a guy, let's say a wide receiver, go up for a pass. And I mean the millisecond he touches that ball, that cornerback or that linebacker is there to meet him, and he's going to knock him into next week. And let's suppose that happened. And that wide receiver does a double backflip and lands on his head. He's laying out there on the field, and they rush in. The first aid people rush in there to see him about it. And they get him off the field, take him to the sideline, run him up and down the sideline a little bit. But upstairs, though, in the announcer's booth, they have what I call a resentment machine. Because now they want to show it again. But this time, though, it's in slow motion. And it looks worse. 5 minutes later, the guy's already back on the field. But the announcer wants to show it again. But this time it's even slower motion. And you can see the pain in his face as he lands on the ground. You see what I'm talking about? Old hurts, old feelings, old angers being played over in your mind over and over and over and over again. And each time they get worse and worse and worse. I have this bottle of water, 16 fluid ounces. So let's say it weighs maybe a pound, maybe just a little bit more. If I hold this out right here like this, immediately I feel it. In about a minute, I'm feeling it even more. 5 minutes later, I'm feeling it even more. 30 minutes later, it's beginning to get like this. An hour later, I can barely hold my arm up. Did you know if I hold my arm up like this with this bottle of water, this 16-ounce bottle of water, for 24 hours, it's going to rip every muscle, nerve, tendon, fiber in this arm and destroy it? That's why we have step 4 in the resentments. Because if you don't let go of it, it will destroy your soul. Period. And it doesn't matter what 12-step program you work. If you don't do this, you are going to go back to what makes you feel good. Plain and simple. I've seen it thousands of times, thousands of people who, like I said earlier, who do this step 1, 2, 3 dance while they're locked up somewhere in a treatment center or in a facility, whether it be prison or David O. Moss or whatever. And then they get out, that's all they need. And that'll work for a while. But sooner or later, they're going to do exactly what they know what makes them feel good. They're going to go back to whatever it is. Unfortunately, I've been to funerals of people who had those ideas. You know, what we have here is a way out. We have a way out that's spiritual, emotional, psychological. But the best way to get out of this, of these resentments, it says here we turn back to our list after we've done the list, for it held the key to the future. We are prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us. And that state of wrongdoing of others, now listen to this, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered. But how? We cannot wish them away more than anything else. And here's the solution. This was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us. They, like them ourselves, they were sick too. We asked God to show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offends, and we said to ourselves, this is a sick person, how can I be helpful? God save me from being angry, thy will be done. Period. I know this is kind of a iffy situation sometimes. I know that some people who I've met over the past, they have been abused in the past, even as kids. They weren't at fault. They were victims. Do they have a right to be angry? Sure. But how many years are you going to hold on to it? How many years is that you're going to let that be as an excuse as to why you can't do things? This is why we have that prayer. God save me from being angry. This is a sick person. How can I be helpful? God's will be done. And it works. The next few weeks, we're going to be discussing more about this. We want to discuss one side of the inventory today about the resentments. But we also have another one we're going to do next week in reference to our fears. No, we're not talking about phobias. We're not talking about spiders and snakes. We're talking about those fears of life. And then after that, we're talking about something that we sometimes do not want to talk about. And we'll reveal that next week. But the point is, though, folks, I guarantee you, it works if you work it. You're not going to get it by coming in here to our fellowship rooms and using the rooms like a bar with the lights on. We're not there to provide you jobs, money, housing assistance, anything else. But we can, though, show you a way of life that's going to be guaranteed to have you a brand new way of life. And you can be set free from these resentments. And it does work. In closing, I want to share with you another verse in 2 Peter 1, 5 through 10. In just a moment, let me find that for you real fast. I didn't have it marked. In 2 Peter 1, 5 through 10, for this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. For you possess these qualities in increasing measure. They will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. But if anyone does not have them, he is nearsighted and blind, and has forgotten that he has been cleansed from his past sins. Therefore, my brothers, be all the more eager to make your calling and election for sure. For you do these things, you will never fail. Wow. If you do these things, you'll never fail. That's a promise. That's a biblical promise. And I can share from my own experience a promise to you that you'll never fail if you do this. But if you don't, like I say, you're going to be miserable. But we do have a way out. And it definitely works. So I'm looking forward to next time, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And we'll be talking about another part of the inventory on fear. Thank you very much. God bless you.